the final segment of the 12th module in our inquiry and journey into environmental law. Some suggestions, summing up and wrap up. It's also an attempt in doing a bit of a crystal gazing into the future as to the law, the governance and justice. We have reached our home stretch and we are on the verge of concluding our study. I think we will have to encounter this question or the host of questions definitely now, having postponed it all the while. And these questions do really bother us. Like so many laws, so many authorities we discussed, why is it that our environment is still not good enough? What are they doing? Why is it that it is getting bad? And it is not just getting bad, it is getting from bad to worse. What are our policymakers doing? Is there nobody to take care, respond, repair, restore and account for, and be held accountable? And so many myriads of questions around this. Such questions, according to me, are very natural and legitimate for us to have, even after this much of learning. But as you must have noticed, quite a bit of an effort has been put in all these earlier modules and particularly in the previous sections of this module to address and answer these questions and many, many more, including a host of suggestions being offered. At this final take, the following are a few final set of suggestions, more by way of observations, to bring all this learning into a logical conclusion, especially for you, the student, to reflect upon, mull over, and if you find it useful, take it home as part of the learning of this discourse. Environmental law, governance, and justice dispensation, if you take a panoramic view of its development, at its infancy, we call it as a very early stage of innocence. It began with great promise and optimism, with a clear determination to put into action the commitment to enable and ensure humanity to get over the environmental crisis that has befallen upon us by ourselves, by our own misdeeds, and within a clearly defined period of time, we will get over this crisis. That's the commitment we made. Remember the 1972 Stockholm Summit, the global solemn promise. This was it. So what should have been a wave at its crest over a period of time of these nearly 50 years, it has waned and ebbed almost to nothingness everywhere. What's happening in India is not an exception. Definitely not in any way different from what is happening in the rest of the world. Definitely, without an iota of a doubt, this is a global phenomenon. We have seen quite a good number of factors and circumstances have contributed to this sorry state of affairs in a very incremental way, competing with each other to contribute to what we are now. Yes, accusing fingers are always going to be pointed at the system of governance and definitely on the industry. But for this particular state of affairs, the contributions of individuals like me and you and the communities of people are in no way less for the current exacerbation of the crisis situation. Nonetheless, as the primary custodians of the environment, as constitutionally mandated, it's imperative that the policymakers and the lawmakers, our representatives in the largest democracy in the world, they must get back to the drawing board to do an overall assessment, review, and initiate steps to repair the damage, recover, and restore not just the environmental health and integrity, and through this particular process, recover and restore the faith the people have reposed in them. And to that end, here and below are a few additional observations and more particularly suggestions to the powers that be, and in my opinion, these are in the realm of doable, realizable in near future by our decision makers. First, it has been for quite some time, there has been this talk about invocation of the doctrine of good faith. What is this? The doctrine of good faith? It simply means at the very first blush, at the outset, when there is nothing to suspect or to get suspicious about, having and thinking good of someone is a welcome and a positive attitude. In fact, this is something with the courts of law, the judges have adopted. All the while, because you know what they say, everyone is presumed innocent till proven guilty. In the American courts of law, this idea has been used with great flourish by Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes when he implored that every accused person that appears before him should be viewed with the lens of a good man. There is a word of caution or a caveat in this particular approach. Make sure that there is no past record to suspect. Then view things on their face value and judge. But make sure that this act of good faith should never be a misplaced one. This idea has been ventilated for quite some time, including through a high-powered committee set up for this purpose. Its report mentions this, and the latest draft bill which we have seen on Environment Impact Assessment 2020 has gotten this into the law itself. As we have discussed earlier, under this law, the doctrine of good faith may be applied in the case of the project proponent in certain cases of lapses and violations by him, and the development may be permitted to continue, not to start. It has already started. There is a violation, but you are applying the doctrine of good faith by collecting a little fine for the deviance and allow him to continue under certain circumstances. This is what the application of doctrine of good faith with regard to the environment impact assessment law. I had already stated that earlier, but let me expand and put it more pointedly that this is not only a misplaced faith, but something that dismantles the very foundation of the environment impact assessment law, which is founded on the principle of precaution. The rigor of the EIA system, as we have already witnessed in an earlier module, over a period of time, right from 1994 to the present draft bill, got diluted over time. And it has worked how? Under the overwhelming influence of the proponents of development at any cost. And this has been facilitated by the ever-obliging bureaucratic setup that has neither changed its color, attitude, our approach, no matter who is at the helm, who is in charge of the government, or what their policies are, to ensure business as usual and make environmental concerns to remain as externalities. This is real danger. And this has to be met upfront. Please recall the clarion call that was given: make in India and sell everywhere, with zero effect and zero defect. This call, which is one of the highest policy pronouncements made from the rocky ramparts of Red Fort on the Independence Day in 2014, has been so cleverly manipulated and orchestrated by the proponents of development. And when I say proponents of development, not just the industry, not just the developer, but those who are cahoots with them in the administration as well, every time to achieve only the first part. What is that? Make in India and sell everywhere. Facilitate ease of doing business. That is the only thing that has been done. You don't view it totally, because the second part is most important, with zero effect and zero defect. This has been completely ignored. What is zero effect? Having least adverse impact on the environment. Zero defect, yeah, if you want to sell abroad to capture the global market, it should have very little defect in it. Otherwise, it would come back. And so, this is the underlying theme: ensure that there is zero effect and there is zero defect. This part has been overlooked. The first part has been projected to make business as usual. And this goes against the very root of this wonderful policy pronouncement. The global ranking of India in the latest Environment Performance Index, at the 168th position out of 180 countries, is a telltale evidence of this sorry state of affairs. To substantiate the point made, the policymakers and the decision makers should not make any more compromise. They should realize this folly of misplaced trust and reverse it to restore the spirit of the EIA law. It's high time this image on the environmental front is reversed. The global image, the national image, and the image that is there before the people of India is something which is sullied. And definitely during this COVID-19 times, it is more relevant than at any time in human history. If at all this pandemic teaches us any lesson, it should begin with re-anchoring this EIA law to the principle of precaution and environmentally sustainable development. There is nothing to negotiate over this. There is nothing to show that misplaced trust anymore. The sooner we realize, the better environment we are going to have. This is just an example, and just to show how the malice has gotten into the system as to give a very bad account of ourselves. Next, a lot of groundwork is required besides preparation and planning in our international negotiations, not just to secure climate justice, but environmental justice for all. And for this, much needed skills of international diplomacy and building of environmental advocacy competence is conspicuously absent so far in us. This need have to be built internally, and our skills are honed very urgently. I think we need have to take a massive exercise of training, teaching, and equipping these representatives of us who go abroad to participate in international deliberations to be better informed, to prepare Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C, to really sit on par with their other negotiators and really get environmental justice for the people of India. This is another very important task that needed to be taken on a priority. Honestly, everything may appear to be worrisome and gloomy on the environmental front, but let me hasten to add here that this is not as hopeless as it appears. All that we need to do is, and with determination, conviction, and stop not this goal is till we reach that goal, to derail the entire thing if we are really serious about achieving environmental and human equity internally, especially within India, within local communities level. The constitution aspires the same. I think the power that be should do well in the days to come to remain as public trustees. This is a must. The existing attitude and approach to environmental administration, I think it's pathetic. We have discussed that in great detail. This will no longer do. Their capacity needed to be built, their competence needed to be strengthened, the legal prescriptions needed to be strengthened to give them a proper direction and also to ensure their autonomy. Their autonomy is under threat, and then you ask them to perform better, improve that aspect in the law, and create an enabling and a facilitating environment to infuse confidence in them, and through which they will be able to give confidence to us. And confidence in them is something which is non-negotiable because they are our warriors of environment. And these will go a long way in bringing in better environmental governance. As public trustees, the government, center, state, the local government, or whoever has been put in charge of any activity in relation to environment should, more than at any point of time, now repose faith in communities of people who, with their traditions, knowledges, and skills, been the conservers, protectors, and developers of the environment for generations. The existing space for their engagement in the law should be recognized, and that position needed to be accorded to them. This has to be illuminated, put into application, and expanded. This is another priority. Well, I can go on for a long time, but many of these and many more in addition to these have already been conveyed all throughout our discourse. They needed to be picked and put to use if they are found to be of some use. With this discourse, and I'm addressing my students here of this particular discourse, the idea must have touched the conscience of every one of you that this current plight of us and of our environment is more than any other on account of the ever changing perceptions our policymakers have, the managers have, and definitely our own about environment. This has been constantly in a flux about its utility, its value, and importance in our lives, on the basis of which we will decide on how important environment for us, and accordingly we act on. And so, blaming anyone or everyone around us will not do. That is business as usual, and that should stop. And we need to think inwardly. We also know that in every such moment of doubt, confusion, difficulty that we experience, there would always be vested interests to look for short-term gains for themselves and to the detriment of others. And they care two hoots what happens to the environment. We need to be very conscious of that. And we need to be very wary of that. And we need to really take care as to see that such people won't take advantage of that situation. And to that end, we perform our role of an environmental steward. And for doing that, according to greater importance to environment in our lives as life giver, sustainer, protector, and enhancer of quality of our existence should motivate us to care for it so that it can take care of us. Learning to live with environment rather than conquering it should be the password. The magic of better environment around us is bound to be a reality, and that is for us to see, experience, and enjoy for ourselves. Well, friends, it's time to wrap up finally. The course is all about a humble attempt to kindle curiosity, encourage, and excite. One to get into the depths of the learning of the subject, to deepen the concern for conservation, protection, and sustainable use of the bounty of nature that's available to us. Definitely, there is no attempt made here to deal with the subject exhaustively or even to exhaust. As a matter of fact, quite a large number of topics, as you know, under the subject remain uncovered. Just to mention a couple of them, I have not touched the disaster management law. Agriculture and law is a huge area by itself. It is well nigh impossible to deal with everything concerning environmental law and encapsulate it in a single frame or a discourse as we are attempting to. Constraints of time and the ever expanding nature of the subject contribute to this difficulty, as I have explained to you time and again. And so, I hope this venture would serve as an appetizer and everyone would be enabled, according to me, to renew our interest in environment as a shared commons, and not as just shared commons, but to assume and take up our constitutionally assigned role of environmental stewards and do our bit in contributing to improving the system of environmental governance in India, and further expand on the legal space available for each one of us to be the partners, participants, eyes and ears for improving the quality of our own environment. As an environmental law educator for about 3 decades, this journey has been very exciting. The world of environmental law has been offering a very rich and a rewarding and highly satisfying experience to me. My thanks, very sincere one at that, are to everyone for having joined me as a fellow traveler and contributed to my learning as well. Hope this has been so to you too. Namaste.